Hi, I'm Travis, and this is Handcrafted Overlanding. Today, I'm going to get to a project that I've wanted to do for a long time. This is going to tie into what I'm going to call my 2-foot cart project. It's basically going to be, as I go through my shop, I'm going to start building carts for easy pack up and mobility that the base floor footprint is going to be 2 foot by 2 foot. So, today's project is going to be a 2-stage um, dust collector using a standard run-of-the-mill shop vac as well as parts you can get off of Amazon. Uh, the fancy bit is going to be this guy. I paid like $30 for it. The actual name brand ones are really a lot more, but um, it should work fairly well. This is going to have a 5-gallon bucket on top, the shop vac down below. It's going to look a little funky because eventually I want to change the top one up to a 15-gallon, but that's going to be later down the line when I can actually find one that isn't like $70. Just like the one cart build or the 2-sheet workbench build. If you haven't seen that, please go take a look at it. It's actually not too bad. I have generated cutout plans, and I'm going to provide a link to these in the description. Now, this is all based off of 1/2 inch sheet ply. Your measurements will differ if you go to 3/4 inch. Also, these measurements are based off of exactly 1/2 inch. So, and as many of you know, plywood is not exactly the dimension it's sold as. So what I'll do is I'll probably update this a little bit later once I get the actual measurements for this particular ply. I think this ply is like, I want to say it's like 15/32 or something like that. It's off by a 1/16 of an inch, but it's enough to probably annoy some people. I know it'll annoy me. So let me go ahead and start breaking down this plywood. I know there's 2 sheets here. We don't use full 2 sheets. I use a full sheet and part of the other one. Now you can get away with using less if you decide you want to skeletonize the frame. I decided not to because part of this build is I'm going to try to build a muffler type system for the exhaust of the shop vac to hopefully bring the sound of it down. It's still going to be open to the front, which is still going to be fairly loud, but we're going to cut noise where we can. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and start breaking this down, and I'll be back. Hey, and welcome back. I finished cutting down and processing all the lumber. Like I said, we didn't use a full 2 sheets, but because of my design, I did use a sheet and probably a quarter, maybe closer to a third. If you wanted to skeletonize the frame or not worry about trying to build in a built-in muffler, you could do this in a single sheet of plywood, which was initially my goal, but because the cart will eventually be used for the CNC router, which is going to run for a fairly long time, I wanted to give it the potential of being quieter. So who knows if that's going to work. So I don't have this built yet. No, it's all built in my head. But to give you an idea what I'm looking to do, on the very bottom is going to be a 3-inch tall shelf where I can put extra hose that I'm not using, or maybe the hose that came with the shop vac. I ended up buying about 50 foot of hose because it was like $10 more than the 25 foot. So I mean, you're already spending 35 bucks. What's an extra 10 bucks at that point? Then there's going to be the space for the shop vac. Then above that is going to, I want to say it's going to be like a 7.5 inch deep shelf. That's going to be for storing the extra filters and bags that I happen to have. It's going to be open in the front, nothing fancy. Then on the very top is going to be space open for the 5-gallon bucket. Now, I'm building this as 2 foot by 2 foot, so that's a lot of extra space for this. The reasoning why I'm doing that is eventually I'm going to change this over from a 5 to a 15-gallon bucket. The reason why I'm not doing that right off the hop is right now in my area, the only place that you can get them are specialized woodworking projects, stores, and like 50 bucks. This was like $3. If you happen to live in an area that sells used food containers, a lot of times they'll get repurposed, sold by second-party vendors, where you can buy them. I ended up buying some 58-gallon plastic drums that held olives at one point, and I want to say I spent $20 each, maybe $20 total on those, and I used them out back after I cleaned them to store extra water. Whole different story, different project if I ever decide to get to that project. Last bit is this is going to have the cyclone attached to the top of it, which is out in the truck, but and I'll tell you why it's out in the truck later. But the cyclone's going to be on top. A hose is going to come up and connect to the top of it, and then out from the front. So this is going to be tippy. What I'm going to do is on that top shelf, I'm going to probably cut a hole, the diameter of the bucket, and it's going to slide right down and sit on the shelf that is designed to hold the extra air filters. Will that get in the way? Probably, but it'll help this from keeping it tipping. One last question you may be asking yourself: why do I have a furniture dolly, a mover dolly? Well, in my area, casters are something like $4 at the cheapest price, except for the shaft models that you have to put through into. I didn't want those. So at $4 a caster, you're looking at an additional $12 for the casters, an extra $3 or $4 for the bolts. Gets a little pricey quick. This guy from my local cheap store, Harbor Freight, was $11.45 total, and this is supposed to handle 1,000 pounds, which means that these are going to be way overbuilt for what we're going to be using them for. But this means I got casters and all the hardware for cheaper than I could have bought them individually. So if you're going to do a project like this, go take a look at their stock. They usually have them on sale. This wasn't on sale price, so they can get them even cheaper. If they don't know what you're talking about, the movers dollies, when I went there, they didn't know what I was talking about. So I simply said, you know the things with four wheels that it looks like you want to skate across the shop, but no, if you did that, you'd break an ankle? They usually glue it in that part. All right, so we're going to glue and tack nail these into place. I might screw them because as a lot of plywood is nowadays, it's all warped. I mean, you can see even this cut, it's kind of twisted. So I'm going to be using number 6 inch and a quarter screws. If I happen to screw this together, I'm going to try brad nailing it first, see how well that goes. But eventually the glue is what's going to be holding it together. I only have Titebond 3, which is waterproof, and it's actually, don't quote me, go take a look for yourself, but this is supposed to also be USDA food approved, which this is, oh yeah, it is right here. Non-toxic is FDA approved for indirect food contact. Basically what I use this stuff for is when I make my end grain cutting boards. I haven't made any in a while. There's so far 2 or 3 of those actually out in a while that I made. I think they turned out pretty good, and the people I made them for, they really like them. And maybe we'll do a project if you guys are interested. Let me know down in the comments if you're interested in seeing me do an end grain cutting board. I try to make it as simple as possible. But I don't have any more Titebond 2. I burned the rest of that out working on last week's project, or the week before's project, making the workbench for Damien. And if you guys can see that, I really recommend going to watch that. It turned out really well. Last bit is, and I mentioned this earlier, this wood isn't exactly ½ an inch. So I made my cuts to try to accommodate for that. So we're going to see how well I managed to hit the mark. We're talking individually, they're, I think, a 32nd of an inch thinner than a ½ inch, and which means that 2 together are 1/16 of an inch thinner. Wouldn't really make a difference. I tried to accommodate that in the shelves. So yeah, a lot of long-winded stuff to say. Let's go ahead and start assembling. Just want to take a quick minute. You saw I finished disassembling the cart. I was going to try to pull the staples out and save the fabric. Not worth it. That's really thin and it tears easy. The wood is glued to, well, it's not actually. It's bride nailed together, and I was using the screws to pinch it together. The upside is they used nylock washers. I'm really kind of impressed about that. These are going to be super long for this project. So, just so you guys know, to take these off, 10 mil, and use a number 3 Phillips head. You want that big old wide grab to grab onto them, because otherwise, there you go. Otherwise, you can see that is just huge. If you don't have that big number 3, you're just gonna sit there and strip that, and it's not worth the effort. These came off really easy. Since this is the thread pitch on these is an M6, and since I happen to have, for my other project, a bunch of M6 bolts that are going to be a lot less noticeably long, although probably won't be using these guys because these are just way too short, I'm going to end up using the M6s that I have on hand. If you didn't want to use or go buy more M6s, what you probably do is flip these over. It'll self-center on those holes. It'll take up that countersink. When you run it through and you snug it down, just come back through with a die grinder, angle grinder, or a like a Dremel, and just cut this down to length. That's all you really need to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to line these up on the 4 corners, pretty much like that. Not going to be super fancy. I'm just going to mark them out, drill them, and bolt them on. I'm doing these before I do the shelf, because the shelf is only going to be 3 inches, and I got meaty paws, and trying to reach 2 foot back with a big old thick arm that's definitely thicker than 3 inches, not going to be fun. That's my recommendation. You saw that I glued on the bottom, glued on the top, but I didn't glue the back on. And the reason is I still need to build the baffling system in the back, so I don't want to permanently attach it now. I am using it as a support, so this doesn't rack back and forth, or otherwise this thing would be on the floor. I would have thrown it into one of my car windows, and yeah, nobody wants to see that tantrum. So yeah, let's go ahead and keep on moving. I got all the wheels on. Now, like I said, if you ended up using the hardware and just cut it down, that would work fine. I ended up using what I had on hand, which actually wasn't M6. I ended up with M5 because these are the ones that were the right length. And to go through the plywood, the caster, a washer, nylock bolt, the 20 millimeter was perfect. So if you ended up doing this and you wanted to order some bolts, 20 millimeters is going to be the size you're going to want for this. And I couldn't imagine doing that with the shelf installed. It would have just been a nightmare. But speaking of shelf, that's going to be the next goal. I'm going to mark on the outside at 3 inches and 3.5 inches, so I have a rough approximation about where I'm going to need to shoot a staple. And we'll glue it in, we'll get the first shelf in. The next part is going to probably be the hardest, because I'm going to start building out the muffler system in the back. And that actually has to pinch between the shop vac and the back of the cabinet. So what I plan on doing is I'm going to put the front stop piece here for the shop vac. Then I'm going to knock the back off, because if you guys recall, I just tacked it, I didn't glue it. So I'm going to knock the back off, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start fitting my first baffle split that'll end up right here, approximately 4 inches forward. Now I could probably just start to guesstimate, but I don't know if that's such a great idea. I mean, as it stands, this is in there really snug, so it's gonna start bowing it out, but the wood's bowed, so it's expected. Anyways, we get that front piece on there. It's gonna get glued and tacked in place, and then, yeah, well, I think I'm just gonna tack it in place first to kind of help with the rigidity, and then if I like where it's placed when it comes to putting in and taking out the shop vac, I'll remove it, glue it, and then tack it back down. Or I may just leave it, who knows. Anyway, so next is going to be getting that taken care of. Alright, I'm going to knock the back out and then we'll go from there. Hey guys, you might be wondering why such a weird design and why such a weird shape. Twofold. One, I want to take up extra room between the vacuum in the front, and two, more space. Hopefully, the more reduction in sound. Two of the pieces I had to go trim down. You can see that that'll fit up right against there. And this should get affixed in there. So now I need to put the next shelf in. Then I'm going to start working on the baffling. And basically what the baffling is going to do is try to break up the airflow so it's not direct. I'm using the clamps to keep the wheels from scooting about. So my baffles are going to be like 1, 2, 3. And I have additional baffles that are going to probably be in between those. The goal is, at any given point, there's going to be at least 4 inches worth of space to allow the airflow through. Why 4 inches? Because I really didn't come up with a reason. I'll probably end up doing a baffle up here as well, because the air comes out is going to be coming out right here. And again, these aren't going to be airtight, although I'm sure that the entirety of the muffler should be. It's not gonna, because I'm just not that good. At least not right now. With the way the wood's bending and warping, I'm going to probably come through and maybe caulk it if I have some caulk laying around. But if not, then oh well. So, time to get the next shelf in. I moved it down. I busted out the table saw. I needed to cut a 1/2 inch off of this to bring the baffle ledge so it'll sit below the exhaust port on the vacuum. And then I took another 1/2 inch off here because otherwise the vacuum the packages would just be crammed in there so tight you couldn't get them out. So I figured I might as well just take a little bit of extra space out of there. So the word I love the most. So time to get the final shelf in, and then gonna make up something for the baffle. Who knows? We'll see what happens. All right, let's get to it. Alright, here's my attempt at the baffles. At the very bottom, I'm going to cut out a couple holes in the back panel to vent out. Yeah, I'm no clue if this is going to work. I hope it does. So go ahead and get that cut and we'll go from there. Alright. I don't know if you can see it very well, but I cut an inlet for the baffle for the muffler in the back. That will sit right there up against the side of it. I think I might eventually put some weather sealant around it just to make it a little tighter. On the back side, I took a few minutes to cut some exhaust ports. Nothing fancy, but it does exhaust. There actually is a lot of air that comes out of here. I don't feel like it's being restricted by a muffler, which is exactly what I wanted. Last thing you want is your exhaust being strained, limited, because then your intake is limited. Yada yada yada. Anyways, so that fits nicely. The shelf below fits nicely. Coil up my hose and put it down under here when it's not in use. The top, for any and all of my extra filters, sit up there very nicely. The last couple of bits to do, and this will probably end up negating the functionality of the shelf up top, is to install the 5-gallon bucket on the top for the dust collection. Anyways, we'll find the center. You go ahead and cut out a hole for that one. Hopefully it won't interfere too much with storage ability on the shelf below. Guess we'll find out. Also, I'm going to have to cut, I'm going to cut a couple of holes along one of the sides, here, or in the back, probably in the back, where I can take my extensions, just drop it in like that, so I can grab them out and use them as necessary. Alright, let me get this on the floor and I'm going to start marking and cutting. Alright, hole for the bucket's cut out, snug in there, and I kind of like that. And like I mentioned before, eventually I want to upgrade to a 15-gallon bucket, and then I want to countersink it like this. And at that point I'm going to have to figure out what to do with the filters, if they still fit underneath there after I center cut this guy. But whatever. I also got some holes cut for accessories, as well as a couple of the heads. All these holes back here, 2.5 inches. Super simple. If you're watching this the day I released it late. You probably will know. There's a reason. The reasoning is I actually went and got some custom fittings made by my uncle. I have some video of that I'll show you guys. But essentially what he ended up doing is he's a mechanic's lathe, or machinist lathe? One of those. I'm not quite sure. And what he did for me is made some custom fittings. Now, this guy right here is the reason for this whole project. It's a cyclone dust separator. What happens is it sucks in, spins it around, the heavy stuff hits the walls, drops down into the top bucket. There's going to be a lid on there like this, or like this, but you get the idea. Then the air gets sucked out of here down into the shop vac, where it's going to do its second stage filtering. It's going to have a bag in it. It's going to have an air filter in it. So it's going to basically be filtering at multiple stages. This keeps the filter and the bag cleaner. This fills up faster to clear this out more quickly. But the idea behind it is your perishables, the filter in the bag, lasts a lot longer and keeps them cleaner longer. That's the idea behind this. But the problem I run into is, and I think this might even be truer for the name brand versions of the Cyclone separator, but I doubt it. I don't know. The size of the inlets and outlets on this are not a standard size. These are all metric in a sense. The pipe that I purchased is 2.5 inch interior or ID inside diameter. The funny thing is I went back to my good friend, the PVC pipe. This time went with 2 inch, and the 2 inch fits in here like a glove. I'll be able to cinch it down with a couple of these band clamps, as I have over here, and that'll keep them snugged up. This internal diameter was 2 inches, and this out here was 2.2 inches. Went over to my uncle's, he went and milled these down, so these fit perfectly. I don't have to try to fill the gap between this piece and this piece. Nobody really makes adapters for it, so big shout out to my uncle. He also, while we're talking about it, made these adapters. This will fit into the shop vac. This will be able to get band clamped to here, which will bring it to the Cyclone, and then on the other side, I'm going to band clamp one of these again to the 2-stage hose, and then the fittings will slide right on like so. So that is why this video is coming out late. Went over to his house. We did a lot of work. You know, family ended up talking. You just a lot of the time you completely lose track of time. So that's why this is coming out late. Let's go ahead and get the Cyclone affixed to the lid. We'll go ahead and get the piping all routed, taken care of, and then we'll actually start giving this a test shot. So let's do it. My uncle happens to have this awesome smithy that he's done a little bit of custom work on, and it is just phenomenal. The skill set that you have to run a lathe is just out there. It's not something I'll be doing anytime soon. That's super cool. Just go around over here.
A little bit more square.
So you've engaged onto this thread unit here to run what axis would this be? Like the x-axis, the y-axis, in without having to touch it at all, right?
Right. It's got the power drive for the cross slide,
Nice.
which I dearly love. Wonderful feature.
And I assume that this is similar for cutting down the x-axis?
Yeah, you actually drop it down into the other side.
Oh, okay.
And it does a gear change to the x-axis.
Sorry about the flickering lights here, and honestly, I didn't get a lot of great footage, and that's more me than it is anyone else. I guess I just wasn't paying enough attention filming. But as you can see here on one of the 2 adapters that's used on the Cyclone, we're doing we're actually expanding the inside of the pipe by 0.2 inches. You know, it's just really kind of cool watching him do the work. And he was taking off, I think, 0.010 of an inch per pass. Since it's the inside of the pipe, he was doing 0.005, I believe. Anyways, it was just absolutely amazing watching him work through this material. talking with him, he said that he actually really likes working with PVC because it's super easy to mill, and I can see why. It was just, it didn't give him any guff. The only time it gave him any guff was my bad end cuts. But yeah, it was just a lot of fun watching him operate this machine. There's so many levers and so many different mechanisms to turn on and off that can do everything. Like, this is doing a power feed. It's actually moving the tool forward into the work, and while it's doing that, he's watching the distance that the bar is traveling. You gotta have to be on your game in order to be operating one of these lathes. And I mean, we've seen my work. I don't know if I would be able to do that good a job, but yeah, just again, thanks to my uncle, he was able to knock all this work out, and he did a fantastic job. I hope you enjoyed watching how those parts were made. I think that was a lot more interesting than me just hooking them up, right? So, got these all typed up. And let's see how much suction we got going on here. Well, it's enough to collapse the pipe on itself, which is, I call that a success. Let's see how well it picks up the dust. Alright, let's see how it did on its collection. Well, it's definitely picking stuff up, and it's definitely separating them. So, I'm going to call that a win. So far, only a couple things I'm not totally crazy about this. One, the routing of the pipe. Probably should do something fancier, but honestly, really kind of works the way it is. Two, it's the fact that this top is so flimsy. I think I want to build something that'll hold this in place and will keep this more of a sweeping curve. But overall, yeah. So cart build was 2 days instead of 1. And don't know if anyone is curious, but I know I am. Can we still get the filters down here? Oh, so close. So close. And then that'll work. That'll work for who it's for. You can only get it in that far, but you know what? That's fine. If you want to get access to your filters, they're going to be right there. You put the bags behind it, and then we have a place for all of our tool portions of this. And besides maybe something to do, how to maintain this, what more can you ask for? Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.